You've made it, my friends. This is my top 10 board games of all time that will never ever leave my board game collection. If you've been following my top 50 board game video series of all time, welcome to the final one. This is the season finale. And if you haven't checked out my other 4 videos that counts games number 50 all the way to number 11, please check them out on my main YouTube channel page. This is a video where we're going through my top 10 games, and I'm so excited, so passionate about sharing these games with you. After playing modern board games for 10 years, I thought it's about time that I share what games I love the most. And I couldn't have picked a better moment and a better community to do this with. And so without further ado, we're going to get this started. Hi, my name's Danny. I'm an avid modern board gamer from Australia who loves sharing my passion for modern board gaming with you, my friends, and my family. Let's go. And don't forget to subscribe for more wholesome board game content. When someone talks about board games for the first time, they often mention some of the classic farming games. Games where you grow crops, you reap what you sow, and then you use those crops to trade in for victory points or sell them at the market for coin to hopefully gain you a victory at the end of the game. And there are a lot of classic Euro games that actually do this well. There's one standout farming game that really sets its sight above the rest. And this is one that has a lot of modularity, a lot of different options, and a lot of different systems that kind of connect together to make a really cool strategic Euro game. It's a game that features a very unusual shaped board that looks like this. If you immediately recognize this board, you'll know that the game that I'm talking about is La Granja has a box that's bigger than my head, but it is full and packed to the brim of brilliant farming strategies. In this game, you're going to be using multi-sided cards that can be used in 4 different ways. They can be tucked at the top of your board, which becomes like little orders that you can fulfill by growing the crops and then, I guess, adding them to your card to hopefully then trade them in for points, which then hopefully gives you a trade commodity as well as a position on the local market board, which has kind of got this area control-esque outbidding mechanism. Then you've also got an ability where you can expand your farm along the edge of your board, or maybe use it to gain extra effects and abilities. You've even got special powers that can be selected that get slotted at the bottom of the board to help tailor your engine and make your farm strategy and farm system feel a little bit more systematic and asymmetric at the same time. What I love about this game is the interplay of systems. There's a lot of different resources, but most of the resources are represented by a single player rod. A rod sitting on an olive farm is an olive. A rod sitting in the pig den is a pig. And the fact that you can then trade and turn them into different products, which then can be used to fill up the different craft houses that are on the main game board, means that as you fill up and you contribute to the local market and the craft houses, you'll be able to gain extra ongoing bonuses which slot into these 6 slots here. It might be gaining extra income or increasing your level on the siesta track each round, or making an extra delivery, or getting an extra good. There's an interplay of different ways to gather your resources and then funnel those resources into a system that best works for you. A lot of the actions that you'll want to take throughout the game are a result of a dice draft. You'll basically roll some dice, they'll get sorted out based on their numerical value, and each numerical value has a particular action associated with it. And when you draft that particular die, you'll get to take that action. This game has taken the resource commodity conversion idea, the competitiveness of a market, as well as the multifunctionality of these cool cards. And if I were to try and work out mathematically the combos of different ways you can use all of the 60 plus unique cards that come in this game, I don't really know what that number is going to be. Maybe you can calculate that for me, but I just love that every time you approach a game of La Granja, how satisfying it is to convert things, to tailor that farming strategy, and to it really highlights that market mechanism in such a unique way that I haven't seen it in any other Euro game. So it definitely has that sweet strategic point, and there's multiple tension points in this game where you really want to pick the right path, and then as you know, converting your resources and trading them in and fulfilling your orders on your cards, you're really seeing whether that system that you've decided to go with has worked for you. The next board game on my top 10 list is a Euro game centered around a theme that when it first came out was like, yes, finally, there is a heavy game with a zoo theme. And I got so excited. I was like, I can't wait to try this. And when I played the game, it really evoked that sense of, yes, there are some really cool card plays in it. You can kind of place these little hexagonal domino tiles out onto your map to kind of expand your zoo and create different zoo enclosures. Ark Nova is a beast of a zoo game. There are lots of things that I really like about it, and a lot of people describe this as like a Frankenstein game, and kind of is like a mish or a meld of lots of other familiar games that we've played before. Primarily, Ark Nova is a zoo building game, and you're going to be taking actions that are driven by 5 action cards, and each of the action cards are going to be aligned to a particular slot from 1 to 5. The action card in the 5 slot is going to be able to be executed at a strength or power of 5, and the action card in the 1, 2, or 3 slot will be executed at that power level. And so the longer you wait and the more that you use the other actions, all the cards will slide up. You can also upgrade the actions in this game by flipping the cards over, and they give you an extra bonus. However, in a game of Ark Nova, I think you can only upgrade up to 3 cards. You won't ever be able to upgrade all of your actions. So you've got to kind of decide which strategy or which actions you're going to lean into more, which will help you achieve your goal. The game comes with a plethora of cards, I think over 244 cards, which feature a combination of animals, conservation cards, and improvement cards. And basically, you've got to try and find combos between particular animals, particular continent tags, particular habitats, and finding that synergy is part of what I love about this game, that discovery of, oh, this card would work well with this other card, but I need to set up this habitat in this particular configuration before I can play this card to get its effect, and then also house that animal onto my map. So it is purely like a great puzzly game where you've got a lot of different geographical parameters to consider, the needs of your animals, and it also has a very big conservation theme. There are particular conservation goals you can play. A lot of people do find this game quite random in terms of the card draw, and trying to wait for certain tags to appear or combos to appear does take a long time, and some people do find that frustrating, but I find that that's actually part of its charm. The idea that, oh, I have these reptile cards, how can I wait for these other things that I need, or do I need to set up a reptile house in order to house the reptiles that I'm going to play? And so there's this infused foreplanning of like what is going to be or what might become, and I know that some of the conditions are pretty tricky in terms of if you're trying to meet them, and things can be quite costly in this game too. The other way that this game is quite interesting is how the game ends, and this mechanic of triggering the end game by having the conservation marker pass through the income marker and crossing over in different directions is inspired by Rajas of the Ganges. The difference of the two markers crossing over, and whoever has the most points when it crosses over wins. People often say that a lot of those traditional Euros are often beige, and that is true to an extent. And sometimes, you know what? I love a great beige Euro. I mean, if you've ever played Stefan Fell's Notre Dame, that's totally beige. But often there are Euro games that come along where they have so much pops of color that they're really almost inadvertently trying to change the trend of how we see Euros. We often describe them as dry, a bit bland, themeless, abstract, but I actually am leaning towards the other way now, where I'm seeing there's a lot more Euros out there that are dressed in color, that have vibrant themes, themes, ones that represent their world in a very authentic way. Marrakesh is a very overwhelming kaleidoscope of options, tracks, tiles, and keshi manipulation that people on first glance think, oh my goodness, it's like someone went into Microsoft Excel, wrote a lot of mumbo jumbo and spat it all out in this big giant rainbow of different components and called it a board game. Maybe it's like a board game Euro blender, but basically Marrakesh has that look. The first thing you'll see is that you're going to be overwhelmed by its color. Now, on closer inspection, this game actually has a very simple flow. Each player has 12 different colored keshis. Those keshis, which are little rods, are linked to different regions on your player board. Basically, throughout the game, you're going to secretly choose 3 out of the 12 colors, and that's where you're going to put your 3 workers on your board. You're essentially saying to the other players, I'm going to be activating these 3 colored spaces. Then, once all players are revealed, you take all of the revealed keshis and drop them in the tower. Yeah. Yeah, I like a good board game gimmick sometimes. But the tower has this weird little net that kind of catches some of the keshis as they tumble through. And so the pool of keshis that you put in, some of them are going to come out, some of them are going to stay in there for the next round. And so you never really truly know which ones are going to come out. And so then what you'll do is you'll sort all the ones that fall out by color, and then in turn order, you'll take turns drafting the different colors, and then those colors will be used to power up the different areas on your playboard. Not necessarily the areas that you place your workers on at the beginning of the round. And so this is where the strategic play comes through. At first you're like, why would I need to commit my workers before powering up the areas? I'm not going to know which ones are going to come out. And this is where careful planning is kind of really critical. You've got to think, oh, I've already got a couple of keshis in the pink zone and also in the tower area. Maybe I'll commit my workers now in that area and hopefully get something from that. And if I'm lucky and I can draft those colors, I can power them up even more. At least I'm guaranteed an action. And so across every season in this game, you're going to be using up all of your 12 different colored keshis, which means that every season you're going to be placing your workers in at least one of the different colored regions. The red one, however, the red keshi, basically gives you that wild option of choosing one place you've already been to before. It does give you a little red keshi person, which is kind of like a water vendor that dispenses water, that gives you water as a resource if you use particular sections. And so you're constantly thinking, should I use my purple keshi now, or should I use my green keshi, which is related to the date production plantation, or shall I save that to the end? Shall I use my silver keshi now, or shall I use my white keshi and hopefully be able to ascend that palace or mosque track? And so it creates these really interesting situations where you're planning several rounds ahead. Well, I probably don't want to use that color now because I know that I don't want the opponent to take the color if it comes out of the tower. And so other colors that have already been caught in there then on future rounds become, fall out of the tower with all the other ones that you put out. And so the options and the unpredictability of how you're going to be able to power up these parts of your board really makes this game, in my mind, go, this is amazing. And when I'm looking for a thematic Euro, I'm often gravitated towards the theme. And the quirkier the theme, the quirkier the concept, the quirkier the storyline, the more engaged and the more I actually want to play the game it's going to be. And so this next game is by one of my favorite designers who's come out with quite a few games in recent times. And this one features a timing mechanism with many different tracks. A game called Aoria. And no, it's not boring, I promise. Aoria basically will electrify your brain. When you see this board, you're like, where is the game? Because it's so crowded with all of these different branching choices that you're like, you don't even know where to look first. Aoria is one of those games that reminds me that Euros can be so fascinating, so brain crunchy and brain churning, and so puzzly that sometimes even I get frustrated when I'm like, oh my goodness, which option is the best option? There are so many different options to go through. This one might be the best one. That it really tickles the neurons. This game basically has you placing different types of workers. You've got like elders, and then you've got little youth workers who basically need a little bit more time before they can be retrained. They basically sit on one of 4 different tracks. And as the game goes by, those tracks are going to move. And as they move, these little workers that sit on there, think of it like a Disneyland ride. And basically workers can get off at different points and they can follow the trail down and collect bonuses and actions along the way. Each of the 4 tracks is connected to 2 different branching tree paths. And each of the tree paths has different focuses. It might be enticing different spirits to your jungle. It could be getting you a particular resource that you need. And so it could be also playing particular cards and things like that. And so what you're going to be doing in the game is as you commit these little workers, you're going to hopefully get particular creatures that come out, which gives you a bonus. You're going to increase the resources on these shared resource track, because all the resources are actually part of a community pool, and that adds to the strategy and the flavor of the game. And so when you're contributing to the pool of resources, do you spend the resources to play cards out and use convert these habitat lands into your tableau and entice other animals? Or do you just get the victory points for contributing to this community pool? And so you're timing it. Do you get off early to get one-off benefits? Or do you wait until you get to the pointy end of your track to get basically off and get a multiple chaining bonuses? And so in this game, you're constantly chaining and working out which things should come off at the right time. It's kind of got this little conveyor belt action where it's like, oh, we're all going up this shopping center escalator. Who's going to get off at level 1? Who's getting off at level 2? And when you get off at the different levels, you get different bonuses and things that you want to do on those levels. I guess that's a really good analogy, being in a shopping center lift. And so this game has a plethora of different pathways to victory, different ways to then layer your habitats out, because you want to place the creatures into your habitat, and each of the creatures scores in a different way. And so it's layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of decision making that you have to be able to work out what is the best and most efficient way to maximize the points. Number 6 on my list, and I think I've really sensed a strong theme with my top 10. I must love a lot of farming games set in different periods around the world, but this game is another beautiful farming game, but it's more centered around getting a positive effect from other players' choices. And this is a game which, if you've ever played games like Earth, where every action that another player takes, everyone gets to do the same action, but whoever takes that action gets like a special advantage action as part of it. This game, I think, was the one that started it all. In fact, this version that I've got, I kind of took a risk, bought it from the bargain bin, knowing that it had a lot of printing errors, and thankfully the version I got, or the copy that I got, actually only had 3 printing errors, which I was able to fix up using a black texter. And the game is called Puerto Rico 1897. Puerto Rico was a game that I heard about when I first got into board gaming, and I often steer clear of it because I thought it was very complicated. I often looked at the back of the box and thought, wow, there's so many buildings and there's so many little text things that I need to get my head around. And so I avoided it for many, many years. And it was only in the last 2 years or so, I was like, you know what, Puerto Rico's got to be on my list. But, you know, there are so many different versions. Which version do I want to get? And I know there's like a really big deluxeified version. I was like, oh, I don't think I want to spend that much money or sacrifice that much shelf space. So I decided, with great investigation, to go with this version, taking the risk that there was some printing errors. But thankfully, this version doesn't have many. What I do like about Puerto Rico is that every round, there are all these different actions that you can take. And so when you take the action, the other players get to do that action, but with lesser benefit than the person who took it. It might be, you know, being able to build a mine instead of building, well, a quarry, sorry, instead of building one of the other little plantations. And then there's a whole smorgasbord of different buildings that have different abilities. There's ones with endgame scoring, there's one with production abilities, there's one with storage abilities. And so there are some really interesting fine points to this game. What you take now is going to allow everyone to take that action, but is it timed in a way which is beneficial to you? You're going to amass a lot of different resources as you build your banana plantation, your tobacco plantation, and your sugar mills and things like that. And so you're going to get all these resources, but where these resources have to go is they have to be shipped off in these boats. And these boats have a particular requirement. They can only ship one type of good. So if you've got 50 bananas, which you're not going to have in this game, and that boat is only going to take sugar, if a player chooses the shipping action, all of those bananas are literally going to go to waste. It has this really interesting tension point of like, okay, I want to diversify in these resources, but I also want to make sure I match the resources to the ones that I've set on these ships, because all players are using the same ships. And you can see how this game has this interesting conundrum. Even the trade workshop where you can trade your goods for money, you can only put one of each type. And if you've created this massive like coffee plantation, then all that coffee will just get thrown out or just sit in front of you, and you hope that no one takes the ship action, because if you do, you're going to lose literally all of that hard work that you've put into it. And so this game has basically a board that has like all your fields or your farms and then your buildings, and then each of those tiles that you place out needs to have a worker that needs to manage it. And to recruit the workers, you need to be able to, it's almost like taking a little piece at a time, and whoever chooses the recruitment action gets an extra worker. And so you're trying to activate these places so that they give you the resources that you need, but then because of these actions and how they're timed, you can basically get fully sideswiped if you don't ship them in time, or if you get in first, you can really block out other players. It is a fascinating game, so easy to teach, so easy to play. Number 5 on my list is a game that I actually sought out for a very long time. Quite a while ago, I saw it on a board game shop shelf and I walked past it so many times. This was a board game store that I often frequented every week, and then I was like, nah, I'm not gonna buy it. Then years down the track after this board game store closed, I was like, oh my goodness, the game that they had, I really want to play it. I think at that time I wasn't really ready for the complexities that this Euro had to offer, but now I feel like with a lot more experience, I feel like I'm a lot more confident in delving into these level of board gaming. And so, having 0 copies of this game, I searched everywhere for it. One I ordered off eBay, and then it never arrived, and then another one I ordered, and then there was a second edition with new art, and all of a sudden, for some reason, I ended up with 3 copies of this game. And so I was like, okay, I really don't think I need 3 copies of this game. Yokohama is brilliant. Yes, it is aesthetically pleasing, but it's the design of the game that really has excelled for me. The fact that you have this map of all these different tiles, you're placing your assistants out on the tile, and then you're moving your president around to places where your assistants have been placed. It's like Hansel and Gretel and placing the breadcrumbs and then picking up the breadcrumbs as you go to find your way home. It has that basic mechanism of looking at what you want to do, laying out your assistants and sending those assistants out there, go to that shop there or go to that little tea farm, I'll see you there in a few days, and then actually going there and then getting the benefit of that space. The problem here is that the more assistants you deploy to the same space, or if you have little shops or buildings in that space, the more powerful the effect you're going to get. So if I have a little building and 2 assistants and my president at the tea farm, I might be able to get like 4 tea resources. I might even also get the power to build another building. And so every single location in this game is tiered, and the tiered nature of it means that if you invest more into that area, what you're going to reap is going to be so much more. It might be in the technology cards, it might be getting little agents, or it could be just getting the things that you need. And the geographical spatial element of the game adds to the puzzle. It's like, oh, if I'm placing an assistant over there, the other players now know I want to use that spot. And so they might strategically use that spot to delay me from being able to use it on my next turn. So then I have to divert and make sure I've got 2 or 3 different areas that I want to go to so that I know exactly how to plan all my actions out. It is a really fantastically clean game that has so much depth to not only what you're doing now, but on 3 or 4 turns time. And the fact that that's becoming public information means that other players can go, oh, well, 2 players want to go to that spot. I might just go there now, take a smaller action, but block out the fact that they need that particular resource. And so that creates some brilliant interaction. And the fact that you can power up by having buildings and shops around means that this game is such an enjoyable experience because it has this building crescendo. Number 4 on my list is, another farming game. Okay, I admit, I love plants. I love being a botanist. I love culturing and growing, and I think this plays true to not only my interest but my personality as well. But I promise you, this is probably the last farming game on this list. At the very beginning I was like, oh, I don't know, this game doesn't really feel as exciting when you look at the cover. And I actually got this game early on when I first started in this hobby, but now when I look back I'm like, you know what? This game is totally right up my alley. I want to squish some grapes. I want to make some wine, and it is Viticulture Essential Edition. This is such a fun game. The thing I like about Viticulture, and I think I'm a worker placement fan through and through. So if you basically say this game is worker placement, sign me up. Viticulture has this great system of dividing the rounds into different seasons. And so in the spring, you're going to wake up, you're going to determine your player order, you're going to plant your vines, you're going to build structures as well. And then in the summer, you're going to be able to pick cards, people are going to visit your vineyard, and then you're going to play more workers out in the fall where you can actually harvest your grapes. You can also mix grapes, and the whole point of this game is to turn those grapes that you have growing on this grapevine or this trellis into different types of wine. You're going to try and age those wines and then fulfill these different purple order cards to get victory points. And this game is essentially a race of efficiency. You want to make as much wine, squeeze the victory points, and the first player to pass 20 victory points triggers the end of the game. And so the more quicker you can do it, the more efficiently you can do those things, you can succeed better. What I really love about this game is that each worker placement space has multiple spots for multiple players. And so when 2 players go to a certain spot, that might block out a 3rd player from going there. You also have a grande worker, which kind of breaks this worker placement rule, where you can use this grande worker to use an action which is already filled up by other players, which is a brilliant sense of flexibility and room to grow when you're in a worker placement game where the whole idea is to block other people from doing the things that essentially you want to do. And I also love the addition of these winter and summer cards that add extra different actions and powers that kind of give you one-off little bonuses to kind of break the rule and get the things that you need. In addition to that, I love how thematically connected and married the mechanics are in this game to the viticulture technique. You're basically harvesting these grapes, you're then storing these grapes and aging and squashing the grapes. You're then combining, the red species of grapes with the the green species to make different types of wine, to make white wine, to make Chardonnays, to make red wine. That whole system of being able to expand your farm using these building structures, they give you all these extra small abilities, which then compound into this strategy and this kind of almost like a systematic production line to get all that wine out the other end of your farm to make the money and bring your family and your name prestige. Viticulture is also enhanced by the Tuscany edition, which I think just shoots this game basically to the stars, because the Tuscany edition features all these really cool modules that just makes this game almost ultimately replayable. And this is what I love about these sorts of Euro games. There's a game that I like, has some really cool modularity to it. It's got lots of fresh, different ways of approaching it. I know in the Tuscany expansion, the board is a little bit more evened out in terms of what you can do each season, but I think Viticulture just sits at the top of my shelf as one of those games that, you know what, I can get a glass of wine out, we can play Viticulture all afternoon, all day, all weekend, and have an enjoyable time. The first game at number 3 comes in a small box that fits in the palm of your hand. It's a game called Sea Salt and Paper. I always have room for deep strategic games that are easy to teach, easy to get to the table, but also easy to play again and again and again, and just get that hit of really cool depth and strategy each and every time you play. Sea Salt and Paper, if you haven't played this game that literally fits in your pocket, you need to play this pretty soon, because it has some definite layers to it. The simplicity lies in what is known and what is unknown. And if you play this game, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. This is a game where basically on your turn, you can either take the top card from one of the 2 discard piles, or draw 2 cards from the top of the deck, pick one and place the other one that you didn't pick face up on one of the 2 discards. And that is all you essentially doing. But there's so much more to it. Each card has a different way of scoring. You've got some cards like the octopus cards or the shell cards where you have certain numbers, you get certain number of points. You have like the sailor cards where you have both of them, you'll be able to get like 5 points, and there's multiply cards if you have certain symbols. But then you've got these duo cards. When you collect a pair of them and you play them, they give you an instant effect. So it might be 2 fish cards that allows you to draw another card, or a shark and a human card that allows you to steal a card from another player, or a crab card that allows you to go through and find cards that have been buried in the discard pile and add them to your hand. And that might help you to complete another pair, which you can then put out again. And then basically that's gonna trigger another bonus action. And so this game is all about timing it right. When you think you have enough collective points in your hand and face up in front of you to beat the other players, you have to take a risk. You have to say, you know what, I'm calling the round. I think I can beat all of you. And when you do that, you reveal your hand of cards, you show everyone how many points you got, and all the other players have one more turn to try and beat you. And if you still beat everyone, you get not only the points that you score plus a color bonus, and the other players just only get a color bonus. And if you lose, you only get a color bonus and the other players get to score their cards. And so that risk versus reward amps this game up to another level. There's also another win condition in this game which I've never ever been able to achieve, and that is if you ever get 4 mermaid cards in your hand, you immediately win the game. I think the max I've ever gotten was 3. This is a game that scales really well but plays exceptionally well at the 2-player count. I just love what it does. I love the open and close information. I love the fact that just when you think you're winning, you're 2 steps behind, or when you're in the lead, you know, it evens out. There's just such a great push and pull to this game of like, why would you discard a mermaid card? That's because you have another mermaid card in your hand, or you drew 2 mermaid cards in that moment. And so when you start to familiarize yourself with the cards, what people choose to sacrifice really says a lot about what they've kept. The Castles of Burgundy. Yes, if you are new to board gaming and you see this game on the shelf, you're probably gonna go, what? And then put it back on the shelf. Because I did that many, many times over the first 5 years of modern board gaming. And it wasn't until like in the last 5 years, I was like, you know what? I've heard so much about Castle Burgundy, I'm gonna buy it. And you know what? You can actually get it for a really cheap price if you're just getting the basic or 20th anniversary edition. And there's so many different kind of versions out there that they're all pretty much very good. You're rolling these dice and then you're committing the value of those dice to what you want to do. It might be, and because your kingdom area has like different numerical values matched up to the different types of tiles, basically that's going to influence how you're going to place those tiles out. And each of the colored regions has a specific purpose. It might be scoring clusters of victory points for having a particular type of animal in the pastures, or it might be moving your mark up the ship track so that you have first pick of the next round of tiles, because the ship track determines the player order. You might also build some mines to increase your earnings of silver. You can use little workers that adjust the value of your dice to increase and broaden the choices. And whilst it does broaden the choices a little bit, not by much, it gives you that little bit of extra breathing space to go, oh, I could do one of those extra things. Using your castle as a way of picking one of the other actions, or even collecting different types of buildings, or even using the yellow improvement tiles to give you different powers that only you can use. Taking the actions based on the numerical value, and then that influencing how you're gonna progress and emanate out across your board, just has an immensely satisfying feeling. It has that feeling of like, wow. It kind of has these little firework moments in your brain where you're like, oh, that number could help me do this, or if I adjust the value by 1, I could do that. If I complete this area now, because there's a little track at the top of the main game board where if you can complete certain things at a certain time, you'll get more points. And as the game rounds progress, the value of completing different regions decreases in point value. So you're thinking, oh, if I complete the small regions, I can get a big point bonus. Or if I complete these large regions early on, I can try and min-max what I want to do. There's so many layers to this puzzle that it is an incredible game that you should not deceive the way it looks to the way it feels and the way it plays. All right, everybody, we have reached the #1 spot. My #1 game of all time that will never leave my collection is a game that is inspired by the Studio Ghibli films. It has an interesting Japanese theme to it, as well as creatures from a forest that are related to Japanese lore. What I really like about this game is it's got elements of deck building, but basically it has dice placement. We're going to be placing dice, you're going to be moving them across this board, and then you're going to be getting lots of different effects to move up different tracks, develop your deck, and move along different paths. It is called Boku. Boku is my favorite board game of all time. The reason why I love Boku is it is probably one of those most thematic Euros that just has all those things that I love in a great point salad. It basically allows you to build a deck, it allows you to manage your board, uncover bonuses. It allows you to push dice up to release things. It allows you to use those dice to then take up spots on the main board, which correlates with different actions. And if you have buildings at those spots, they trigger bonuses that you can get. And then those dice are going to cross a river and take up spaces on the other side. This is a dice placement narrowing strategy game where as the dice move up across the board, they're going to slowly take up spots and block other players out. It has a brilliant way of tapping into multiple parts of Euro games that I love. I love the little dragonfly tiles that you can combine together with little spirit tiles, which give you different bonuses immediately. You've also got this little track where you can send all your little pilgrims to go on a pilgrimage to give you little extra points, and then they go and rest. And you've got all these really cool ongoing benefits that you can collect. You've got it basically, it's collection overload, dice worker placement overload, and it also has a cool deck synergy to it where you can sacrifice a card at the end of every year to then have an end game scoring power. The values of the dice also matter as well, because the value on the dice determines the power of the effect that you're getting. And plus there's multiple levels of competition that you've got in different regions. And so there's basically 5 races going at the same time. You've got your Boku creatures where you're making a Boku path, and they're collecting different types of Boku in order to score endgame points. This game basically said, you know what, we'll take every Euro component and mechanic we can get, throw in the box, shuffle it up, throw it around, blend it up, and out comes this game called Boku. It is definitely like a super green milkshake because it's got green everywhere. But, you know, it is a game that speaks true to what I love about board gaming. Lots of different ways to score points, lots of different strategies, lots of tension points, points where like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited when I can use that die to get that action to move my pilgrim up that track. It's just, oh, it's so beautiful. It is definitely a clunky sort of board game, not the most elegant one out there, but this game gives me the greatest feeling. And so, what did you think of my top 50 board games of all time? It's taken probably 2 years to cultivate and cull and think about this list really deeply, and to think about which games and what order they should go on. It's been a huge labor of love of researching games, playing games, buying games, swapping games, trading games, talking about games. You know, this whole cycle of like board gaming is all encompassing, and this could not have been achievable if it wasn't for you, the viewers, you, the subscribers, you, my friends and family, as well as the Patreon members who've supported me and buying me a coffee every month. I've truly appreciated every single one of you and every single view, click, subscribe, like, whatever you did to just engage, whether you just watched, you know, on a Friday night whilst you've had a long day at work so you can discover which board games to add to your wish list. This has been such a pleasant and heartfelt experience that I've no words to describe, you know, what's next for Board Game Sanctuary. And, you know, all I can say is that I'm really inspired. I have so many really cool ideas that I've written down, and after this, there's a whole lot more amazing board game content to share with you. Thank you so much for joining me for my top 50 modern board games of all time. If you really want to relive that experience and see the stories, then head back to the original one and start the playlist again. And I hope your next board game experience is a beautiful and enjoyable one. Thank you once again for having me in your lounge room or wherever you may be. This is Danny signing out. I'll see you in the next video. See you soon.